Quân quá, hiểu không?
Hello everyone. Our group so far have found out an interesting topic on the book called International Perspective on Teaching the Four Skills in English Language Teaching, edited by Anne Byrne and Joseph Siegel. So in our presentation today, we focus mainly on the chapter 2 of this book, called What Teachers Say About Listening and Its Pedagogy, a comparison between two countries, written by Dennis Santos and Susan Graham. So first of all, let me introduce briefly about the content of this chapter 2. According to Noonan, in 1997, about 2 decades ago, listening was described as a Cinderella skill in the second language learning, receiving little teaching or research attention compared with other language skills. And many research carried out over the past 20 years ago so far yet increased knowledge about the factors that contribute to successful listening comprehension in second language. So in this chapter, the objective of the writer is exploring teachers' stated belief and practice about listening and its pedagogy, drawing on questionnaire data from two different settings and mixed comparison. The first one was a study with 115 foreign language teachers in England, and the second one was a similar study with 40 Brazilian English foreign language teachers. And finding from these data, we draw out implication teacher can consider for teaching of listening. So why the writer in this chapter taking a cross-national perspective in exploration of listening? The first reason was identifying the commonalities between groups of language teachers in different parts of the world. Second one was gaining a better understanding of the impact of local priority and constraint in listening pedagogy. And finally, they want to help teachers to develop effective listening pedagogy. So before looking into the reason of two studies carried out in England and Brazil, we go through finding from other research to explore what others researchers found out into second language listening and its pedagogy. Many research so far has focused on how the following of three keys imping on successful listening. The first one is the presence of an interplay between bottom-up and top-down process. Second one was the application of strategy in listening performance. And the last one was the use of metacognition. Can be defined as thinking about the thinking and learning process. So first of all, many researchers thought that successful listening involves skillful integration of bottom-up process and top-down processes. In this bottom-up processes mean attention to smaller component of what is heard, such as sound, words, sentences, and top-down processes, including activation and retrieval of prior knowledge about contextual feature characterizing the listening event, such as topic, genre, participant, or so on. And an important factor in this discussion is that neither top-down nor bottom-up approach are good or bad, better or worse. So we have to collaborate between these two factors so that the learners can have a perfect listening skills. And finding from other research also show that little is known about teacher belief and practices regarding learners listening strategy development in spite of indication from research pointing to improved listening performance and increased confidence facilitated by instruction in the use of these strategies. And greater success has come from study have involved a metacognitive and reflective component. The development of metacognitive awareness is possible through post-listening reflection and discussion, as shown in studies such as study of Gold and Tape in 2006 with young foreign language learners. The importance of teaching listening is that teaching listening as a process, not as a product. In other words, learners should be encouraged not simply to listen and answer comprehension questions, but they have to understand what listening involves, to reflect on difficulties and contemplate solutions, to discuss the application of knowledge from listening experience to future listening events. Yes, so far it is the finding from other research.
So here I'm gonna give you some stated beliefs and practice about listening in England. So we will focus on 4 bullet points here. The first one is focus on task completions over skill development. So as you can see, English in England emphasized successful task completions in listening exercise rather than focus on developing broader skill of listening. So the main concern were ensuring students understood and fulfilled the requirement of the task. So as all the teachers ought to do with the grammar task, like we just focus on doing the exercise, but not focus on the broader skill of all 4 skills. And the second one is the curriculums and the guidelines. Okay. So for the next one, this one. For the assessment driven approach, English education system strong emphasis on achievement levels, and teacher prioritize assessing students based on the correctness of their response. And in the English national curriculum, and just limited emphasis on bottom-up skills. As Ling says before, a good listening skills that we have exercise for student. We should have the should have the emphasis, and we should have the collaborations between bottom up and can you tell me the other one, bottom up and top down,
bottom
right?
up and top down processes.
Yes, and the final one is some for the listening skill in England. It is the research found that a lack of activities promoting metacognitive thinking, where students reflect their own listening processes and strategies. Okay, so this is for stated beliefs. Now I'm going to move to the learning English in Brazil. So learning English in Brazil, the place of listening. The first one is for the mandatory English learning. This one is learning a foreign language is compulsory in Brazilian schools during the final 7 years of mandatory education from 11 to 17. Additionally, English tuition is offered as an extra curriculum activity by numerous language institutions. Okay, so next one is for curriculum and guidelines. Both private and state schools are expected to follow curriculums guidelines set in Brazilian national curriculum. The guidelines shapes the educational approach and goals for teaching English. And for the third one, this is the learning English in Brazil. Just emphasize on socio interactional aspect. This means that listening practice should focus on understanding the socio-interactional aspect of human, such as who is speaking, to whom, and from what for what purpose. So this is for the socio-international aspect. I mean, like when teaching students about listening, teacher need to ask them about their daily life as well, like about who is speaking and about what they can listening like everyday situations. And for the next one is for the recommendations for effective listening. Recommendations of effective listening include exposures to diverse genres and accents. It and is an analysis of both linguistic and non-linguistic as well. For linguistic, it is for the intonations, and for non-linguistic, it is the speaker right to take a turn. And for the final one is testing and perceptions of weakness in listening skill in Brazil. This is standardized tests in Brazil primarily assess reading skill only. Like most of curriculum in the world, like in Vietnam, we also focus on just reading skills and for the grammar part. And with listening assessment not being included, like the British Council report indicates that many Brazilians perceive listening as the weakness area of their English proficiency, like for Vietnamese students as well. We can see that Vietnamese student weakness may be also listening skill or speaking skill because this is the skills that teacher spend the least of their time on. And this is for the learning English in Brazil. Thank you. And now we move to the next part will be delivered by Hia.
Thank you so much. So in this part, I am expected to introduce some procedures as well as activities applied in the teaching listening in Brazil. What you can see on the screen is the one of the earliest procedure to teach listening, which is a top-down procedure. The first step of the procedure is talking about the topic in which the student will be familiarized with the topic and some vocabulary. And the next step is listening for the first time, in which student will have the general idea of the meaning. Then they will read the questions and listen again to answer the question or complete the blanks. And the last step is to listen and check the answers. So that is one of the most earliest procedure in teaching listening in Brazil. You can see in the first step and also in the second step, it is focus on the context and also focus on the meaning of the topic. However, can you move to the next slide, please? Yes, however, in 2008, Phil has mentioned about narrowing. It is a movement in which teachers in Brazil moved from top-down procedure to bottom-up emphasis on teaching listening by breaking down the tasks. So many kind of new strategies as well as practices has been employed in the process of teaching and learning listening. And one of them is prediction making. As you can see, prediction making appears as an important step to be done in the class, but not necessarily. So it is optional. In this step, students will be asked to make predictions about topics, about the vocabulary of the topics, or about the possible answers of the questions. However, prediction verification or prediction confirmation is rarely mentioned by teacher in Brazil, as this rarely appears in the lessons. Next slide, please. Okay, another procedure, or should I say learning theories, appears recently is the metacognition in teaching and learning, in which That is the process of thinking about our own thinking and learning. So we think about our thought. There can be some activities as well as practices could be applied in this teaching and learning theory, which is assessing the task, evaluating strengths and also one's weaknesses, planning the approach, applying the strategies, and the last step is reflecting. Then we can go over again the cycle. Thank you. Some practices have been applied to the listening, teaching, and learning in Brazil. The first one is mentioned before, the prediction making, in which student previous knowledge about the topic, and so the vocabulary will be activated. The second practices is pair work or group work, in which the teacher will simply focus on check the answer, not to focus on, let me see, uh, on the thought of students when working in a group. And the last practices mentioned in this research is discussion about problems in the process of listening. So they can bring the learner's voice to the surface and reveals what might go on in their mind. The teacher also introduced the the diagram, should I say, or the graph about the continuum of process focus versus the product focus in teaching listening. As you can see, if you focus on the process, the teacher should focus on how to listen well, strategies to listen well, the communication, the students' autonomy, and the feedback should be how the task was handled. Why focusing on the products, uh, teachers should focus on how to manage tasks. What are the task demands? What about the exams, tests, the control of teacher about the pausing, the eliminating difficulty, and the feedback should be how many correct answers, what are the marks, what are the levels of the students, and therefore some other procedure, new procedure has been brought out. The first one is focus on products procedures, in which the first step will be briefly talk about the topic, then they will present new vocabulary. The third step is playing the audio, and then some comprehension question will be asked and answered by teacher and students. The other procedures uh, introduced by the author is the focus on both process and products, or should I say, some on process and some on products procedures. The first one, first step is warming up about the topic. Then the teacher will ask the students' opinion about the topic of this listening, and the last step is ask the students if they understood the purpose of the activity or if they understood the contents and content and context of the listening. And that is my part. And now I should introduce Ms. Phương to summarize the research again.
Okay, so for my part, I'm gonna tell you about, for this part, I'm going to summarize the typical pedagogical sequences in Brazil and in England. So as you can see from this table, so for Brazil, English teacher guides student activations of prior knowledge about the topic. However, in England, teacher checks student understanding in the task. For the Brazil, teacher revise or pre-teaches relevant vocabulary. So as I said before, teachers in Brazil just focus on the wider knowledge of student, focus on understanding about the broader knowledge, like provide student with some general knowledge rather than specific knowledge. And however, in England, teacher checks how many answers have been completed. So it means that teachers just focus on achieving correct outcomes. However, in Brazil, teachers play audio and students listen for general ideas, as I said before. Teacher in England plays audio again and again. So in Brazil, teachers plays audio again and student listen for details. Teacher in England ask for answer and student respond, just like the way that teachers in most part of the world do when dealing with the listening part. And in the Brazil, students check answer in pairs or in group. However, in England, teacher check how many correct response each learner has. So as you can see from this table, I can summarize some similarities and some differences between these two countries of how teachers deliver teaching skills to students. So for the first similarities, it is the setting approach listening as a product prioritize the immediate listening comprehensions rather than the specific part. And in both countries, it is emphasis on achieving correct answer rather than fostering skills to future listening events. And the next part in the next similarity, it is in both contexts. The listening strategies are mentioned. They tend to be implicit and and let me say that one more time. The similarities, the strategies are part of teachings, but address part of learner awareness about listening. So I also find three differences in the way of teaching listening in two countries. The first one, in England, teachers focus on achieving correct outcomes. In contrast, for the Brazilian teachers, just prioritize the comprehensions and understanding, transitioning from top down to bottom up. Um, next one, the next differences is in Brazil, there are some indications of attentions to strategies development. However, yeah, that is for the Brazil. And for the next one, for the next differences, it is the Brazilian context often lack of emphasis on lifelong skill in education policy. So that is for the summary between the typical pedagogical sequences in Brazil and in England that I have just delivered. Now I want to move to the very next part. Will be presented by Nha.
Thank you. So now I'm responsible for the implications for the second language listening practice. So okay, for each of these key areas below, the researchers outline some suggestions that teachers may wish to consider in light of their respective context. The first one is analysis of local demand. The second one is participation in global conversations. The third one is teacher awareness, raising about belief and practices. The fourth one is materials evaluation. And the last one is continuing professional development. So let's start with the first one. The first suggestion, analysis of local demand. So the local demand in the form of educational policies, assessment, and student needs are likely to have an impact on how listening is taught. However, their demand also likely to create tensions. For example, it can focus on the exam and lead to the fact that teacher teach for the exam. So the exam, that have lack of exam may lead to inconsistent performance. So teachers should raise their awareness of which aspect of listening development such local demand neglect and try to make up for them. And these are some reflective questions that the researcher suggest to the teachers. The first one is, do local demands focus on listening as the product or as a process? What is typically done in responses to local demands? What is achieved from the practices in the short and long terms? What is not achieved? The second suggestion is participation in global conversation. Teachers might learn to think outside the box in respect to listening by exchanging ideas with colleagues worldwide. So the global conversation might also have identified local innovation approaches to teaching that may be adopt one own context. So there are some ways of participating in these professional conversations, including participation in conference, webinars, online forums, or social media. The third suggestions is teacher awareness raising about belief and practices. So teacher can write down and reflect on the procedures they easily follow when carrying out listening activities and justify those procedures. These are some reflective questions that teachers should consider in teaching listening strategy. The first one is, do I tend to prioritize task completion or listening development? Do I tend to focus on the here and now of listening tasks, or am I contributing to the development of autonomous listeners? Am I more concerned with what my student answers or with how they have listened? Okay, the the fourth one is the materials evaluation or adaptation. Teachers should ask themselves what listening skill and knowledge does this activity purpose or develop, what skill and knowledge does it neglect, and what do I want to teach my student. The last one is continuing professional development. So teacher responses in both contexts, research in the projects indicate that most of them have received the relative little breeze or in-service training in how to teach listening. And the finding suggest that this development would be benefits to teachers, particularly regarding the roles of strategy development and metacognition in listening pedagogy. And the last part is presented by Ms. Ling.
So thank you, Phương, Hiển, and Nhai for all your sharing of the content of this chapter. And to be concluded, this chapter provides important insights into the role of contextual factors in how listening is conceptualized by teachers and how listening pedagogy is realized in classroom. Besides, it illustrated a high degree of commonality across contexts. So such insight contribute to the task of finding way of helping teachers to become more confident and proficient in developing the listening skills for their learners. And at the end of this chapter, some reflective questions was raised for us as an English teacher teaching listening skills. First of all, in this chapter, we reported some procedures teachers claim to follow when teaching listening, as well as how they justify those procedures. So how have you reacted to these procedures and justifications? To what extent do they relate to your own procedures and rationales? And the second one is, if you had to choose one aspect of this chapter that make you stop and rethink your belief and practices about listening. What aspect would that be and why? And finally, what is the role of strategy in the way you teach listening? And to what extent do you think you have developed learners who are strategic listeners? So that is the end of our presentation. Hope that you can get useful knowledge regarding to teaching listening skills for your students.